All right, so this is forensics. We're down to Mod 4, acquiring evidence in a computer forensic lab. And the other thing I want to tell you, super important, the Google Cloud coupons work. They have been fixed. So if you go here into the canvas, Google Cloud coupons are available. So if you have a mail.ccsf.edu account, you can go here and get a free $50 coupon to run Google Cloud machines. And so that's good. Of course, if you have a credit card, you can get $200 or $300 free from Google Cloud anyway, but in case you've used that up or you don't have a credit card or something, this is another alternative to get some free cloud service. And you could use it in this class or for any other purpose. So let's talk about Mod 4, which is here are the modules. All right. And there it is. All right. So when you make a computer forensic lab, there are now standard recommendations out there from various agencies. There's one like the American Society of Laboratory Directors, makes guidelines and such. There's an ISO standard for it to calibrate laboratories. There's a scientific working group on digital evidence. There's a lot of people that developed the science of computer forensics and recommendations for it. And there's a lot of private sector computer forensics labs. The main one I know is DriveSavers. DriveSavers is a Nevada-based company, and they're sort of the world leader in recovering data from damaged systems. So if you have some kind of disaster with your computer, you can take it to them, they will recover the data, and they also have a legal branch where they will do forensic examination and do it in a forensically sound manner and send one of their staff to go testify in court about what they found. So they'll do that in a private form. Anyway, so there's a lot of private labs that just do forensics, computer forensics. They're not part of the police. They are typically on defense, private labs that do this. And so also there's a ton of investigations that are never intended to go to court. Corporations have their own forensic labs because typically if you're at a corporation, there are all kinds of security problems like malware outbreaks, hacking, people trying to steal money from inside the company and so on. And you typically do not ever want to go to court. You just want to find out what happened and then do something like demote that employee or fire them or something, and typically you don't really want to go to court and prove it and have a scandal and everything. You don't need to, but you do want to know what's going on. So you have your own internal forensic examiners, or you hire consultants from the outside to come in and examine breaches and such. So banks and credit card companies and all the large corporations have their own internal practitioners. Accounting labs also have people that will help you. And another category I mentioned before is e-discovery, where you have to get data for the purpose of litigation. You'll get sued, and then you'll have a court discovery order saying you must turn over all the evidence having to do with your relations with this company for the last 7 years. And that's a forensic task, digging through all your systems to find all that stuff. So a plaintiff is the person that complains about somebody, and they can request all the electronically stored information about a topic, and you have to find all the Word documents and spreadsheets and everything. The Sarbanes-Oxley Act, I think, was passed in response to Enron, which requires you to maintain electronic information. In Enron, there was an accounting scandal. Their accountant knew that they were going to get sued, so he deleted all their data. So when they came, it was all gone, and that's illegal now. You must retain the information. If you get a court order, or if there's a reasonable expectation that you're likely to get sued, you are required to retain your data. You can also get notices that tell you to produce documents, and you can get notices that tell you to preserve documents because there may be requests coming later. So e-discovery is essentially the same thing as a forensic investigator. You're searching through backup tapes and drives and systems and networks to find all the data matching certain keywords and so on. If you get to be a large company and you just have a steady stream of lawsuits, which is what it is to do business in America, then you in fact install e-discovery software, which indexes everything you do going forward to make it easier to recover it all later. All right, so evidence acquisition is extracting evidence from storage devices. You use various image software, and you are making read-only copies of these things so they can't be modified later. And you might have to crack passwords and decrypt drives to get in password-protected files. There's email, of course, you got to get into, and you're eventually going to have an inventory where you have all these stored hard drives of all these different cases, so you have to have a good system of indexing them so you can find them, and a good safe place to put them, like a locked room or a safe or something. And this is a thing beginning independent contractors often fail to think about. If you do a case, you charge money for the case, you're going to have to store all that stuff for at least 7 years. So you really ought to be charging them for storage. And this happened to a lot of companies. You have piles and piles of junk filling up your storage, and you have to keep getting more and more storage, and you wish you'd remembered to charge for that. Let me check the Twitch for comments. All right. Looks like nothing about the topic. All right. So, all right. So there's information management systems, like I say, to keep track of where you stored all your stuff. And an issue of web hosting is good. I know this is how the FBI does it now. When you have an FBI case, they seize the documents, the computers, they send them to the lab. The lab will just image everything and put it in the cloud, and the examiner will examine the data in the cloud using FTK. So that way, it's a good centralized way to do it. All right, so your layout will look like any other computer lab. Here's an example of a small lab. You'll have workstations and storage units and such. So you'll have equipment, evidence locker, someplace to lock up your evidence, workstations for PCs and Macs, and a workbench to do hardware work on machines. So your workstations are going to have to be password protected, and you will want to have a very powerful system because it takes a long time to image a drive, it takes a long time to analyze the evidence on a drive, and having a powerful processor with a lot of storage saves you a lot of time. There are specialist workstations you can buy, Fred workstations. You can also just install your own software and hardware to make any version of it you like. Got a workbench to take apart things with enough tools. And a mobile device in particular is quite a job. Taking apart cell phones and mobile devices requires special tools and techniques. And you might have a good assortment of that, or you might choose to outsource that to a company that you hire that is an expert in that kind of device. Either way, here's some device you might need. Cellebrite, we mentioned many times, Cellebrite UFED is the expensive device that can punch through the passcode on every cell phone, or at least a lot of them. Cellebrite does make them. GrayKey is another one. They only sell it to law enforcement, but GrayKey will unlock iPhones, at least up to the 4-digit pins it can. I'm not sure if it can do the latest ones. The Occupant Forensics and Blacklight and all these other devices are other devices that help analyze things, portable devices primarily.
Brute force, or how do they crack
The GrayKey does it by brute force, and what they found is you can plug into the charging port on an iPhone, and you can typically only guess 10 times before it locks you out. So it guesses 9 times, and then it reboots the phone. Then it guesses 9 more times, so something like that. So it has to let it run for like a day and a half, and it'll break in. So pretty simple. Yeah. All right. And then you'll have a field kit storage unit. This will be a kit to perform on-site collections. This is something you often do with a relatively untrained person. You send them to the site to just image the drives and nothing else, and they just know how to do that. So you have sanitized hard drives. You have hard drives that have been completely wiped. So anything on there is evidence to the machine. This is one of the things you should do as a best practice. Then you have a powerful laptop. You have some kind of evidence capturing device like Cellebrite, Faraday bags to store hard drives and cell phones so they can't get signals from the outside, hard drives, USB and other types you can connect just to store everything, SSDs perhaps, flash drives, all these storage devices you can connect into things. And you might need a mouse jiggler. If the machine is turned on and logged in, you don't want it going to sleep. Then you'd need the password to wake it up. So mouse jiggler is only to keep it alive. And then forms, most important being chain of custody. When you see stuff, you immediately fill out a form saying, here's what it is, here's the serial number, here's everything about it, and here's me, here's who I am, and the time and date when I took it into my custody, and then I secured it in things like an evidence bag and transported it somewhere. So you can have an unbroken chain of custody. So there is somebody who is making sure nobody was altering the evidence from the time you seized it until the time you go to court. All right, and evidence bags can just be plastic bags that you can seal. They don't have to be terribly strong. They're just supposed to be tamper evident. So when you get to the other end, if that bag has not been broken, then you say nobody has messed with the evidence. Although at DEF CON, there is a contest in, I think, the 6th year now of performing tampering with tamper-evident things. They have a lot of cool techniques, like they get acetone and a Q-tip and they dissolve the glue and go in and mess with it and put it back. You know, you can, of course, tamper with tamper-evident seals, but it's difficult. That's all it is. Nothing is ever perfect. And a lot of tools and so on you might have. So You have a Faraday box or a Faraday room is a place you can examine things like cell phones, which might be receiving signals from the outside, and you want to make sure that doesn't happen while you're examining them, so you work inside a container that is surrounded by wire mesh to block the radio from the outside. And then you have an evidence locker where you can store stuff that's locked up like a safe or something, so you can go to court and testify, we made sure nobody messed with it. And then cabinets, of course, and hardware. The most important thing you need is a write blocker. You might want a cloner that will just clone drives to make it fast and easy to make copies of drives, but the most important thing is a write blocker. You have to have this. This lets you read a drive and make a copy of it without altering any of the data on the drive. This is the fundamental activity of a forensic examiner. And these drive things cost $300 now. They're really quite complicated. They have to have memory and a processor and software in them because modern operating systems write to drives constantly. As soon as you boot up, it writes on the drive. It writes things like the journal and such. And you have to have a box that will trick the computer into thinking it has done that, but not really send it to the drive. The SIM card readers, of course, read those devices. And you have to have a lot of drives to put the evidence that you collect. You have a lot of large hard drives. They say use thousands of drives annually as the thing. And you're going to have to store them for years after that, too, storing all that data. And lots of toolkits for all the fasteners and gadgets you're going to find in computers, flashlights, cameras, evidence bags. Like I say, you're just an evidence bag, nothing special, but it has a place to write down who seized it, where it was seized, and then you seal it. And then if it's still sealed at the other end, you say nobody tampered with it. And then, of course, software. You got to have forensic and bitstream imaging software, like Sleuth Kit and Autopsy is to examine data, but you harvest it with things like FTK Imager, and there's a lot of brands of this, like X-Ways Forensics is a big one, WinHex, Paladin, FTK and Encase are the big suites. There's a lot of these. These are all software kits. This stuff is free and open source. This stuff is very expensive and proprietary, and the standards are FTK and Encase. That's what most people use. Let me take a look at the Twitch. Gray keys are so cool. If only I could buy one. Yes, I've heard they are. I've never seen them. I just heard about them. Issue remote connecting to their Azure signature. Yeah, there is a way to reset your password in the Azure console. Yep, that's right. Somebody's told you that. Good. And I can show you how to do it after the lecture if you share your screen too. All right. And all right. And so then you want antivirus software, which is useful, in general. And virtual machine software is often required. You might want to boot up. You might make a clone of the drive, and then you might discover that they used some goofy software that you don't have, like WordPerfect or something. And then you want to use that software to read the files, so you boot up your image and boot up the evidence machine, and now you can use the software installed on there to analyze stuff. That's something you might want to do. And password cracking, just like hackers, you will find password-protected zip files, password-protected folders and stuff, and cracking into them is a useful thing to do. One simple way to crack in is to just harvest every readable word from the hard drive. That'll give you a dictionary of words, and then you try all of them to see if any of them is the password. That if they say the password anywhere on the drive, that'll work. That's one way to go, but there's a lot of other techniques, random passwords, commonly used passwords, and so on. Of course, if somebody really uses like a 14-character random password, you're not getting in. There is no known tool that will find it, but most people don't. Most people use like a dictionary word plus a number or something, and then you can try them all with password cracking tools. And of course, photo forensics, photos are very important. JPEGs are the most common, but there's GIF, PNG, bitmap, and RAW. And photos are extremely important because everybody can easily understand them and make very good evidence in court. You show somebody a photo of somebody doing something and the jury understands that, whereas some complicated technical thing involving binary analysis is hard to explain. And the EXIF data includes stuff like the camera manufacturer, the date and time, and often the GPS coordinates of where something happened. So it can be extremely useful. All right. And there's a tool here that can carve out and reconstruct photos. This is one of the tools. There used to be another one called ProDiscover, I think, that would do it. Most tools like FTK and Encase, they will just look at the unallocated sectors and they will find a header for a photo. Then they'll just move forward until they find the footer and they'll call that an image. But the image might be fragmented. So you might have junk in the middle, so your image will get all distorted, and they usually don't do anything about that because most of the time the image is okay, and you accept not getting all the images. maybe 20% of them are damaged, but you could make a better tool, and that's what this adroit forensics thing is, that actually tries to detect the fragmentation and remove the unnecessary junk and rebuild the image more completely. It could be done. Generally, people feel it's like it's not worth the bother, but there are tools you can get that will do a more thorough job of reconstructing the images. You'll need a lot of energy because you're running a lot of powerful computers. You got to have fire extinguishers and all that jazz, and it's expensive. That's why you have to charge a lot of money for forensic work. You spend a lot of it on equipment and maintenance as you get all increasingly expensive stuff, software licenses and all that jazz. And you have to, of course, restrict access to the lab. You have to have a key system or card swiping so you know that nobody's going in there except the authorized people. Otherwise, you're violating your chain of custody. You're going to go to court and testify, nobody got in here except the authorized people, and you want to make sure that's true. Then you got to review your data, of course, know who's allowed to get in there, physical security, and typically you have auditing. So you know who's going in there, like a CCTV system or something, so you know who's coming in and who's leaving, so you can say who was in there when something happened. Just the same thing's true of a server room. You want to know who's in there, so if anything bad happens, you know who was in there doing things. And you put it in a secure physical location, considering things like earthquake and fire and flood and all that. So when you examine your evidence, you want to learn some way to collect evidence. Often you want to use Linux. DD is the main tool used to duplicate data. D3DD is a tool that also takes hash values and is nice. grep is a tool you can use to search for keywords. And so when you're getting data, one big issue is financial fraud, which typically means stolen credit card numbers. And there's different categories for credit card numbers. I think the first digit tells you which company issued the card. And then there's at least here's a number somewhere. I'm not quite sure where that number is, but the first 6 digits of the credit card go in these ranges. And the different credit card numbers have different lengths and so on. And then the checks have an ABA number, and there's a similar system where the digits tell you which of the main Federal Reserve Bank is overseeing those checks. And there are skimmers. You read about these a lot on Brian Krebs' blog. He's an expert on this stuff. You can go online and purchase skimmers, which will look exactly like the magnetic stripe reader on a bank, and you just stick it on top, and it makes an extra copy of that. And so it'll look perfectly fine, but it's making an extra copy of it, doing something like sending it, storing it locally on a USB, or sending it by radio to some nearby device. And they often have a camera attached too to catch the pin as you type it in. So these are all over the place. There are many examples of these skimmers. All right. And then, of course, the last issue brought up here is steganography. I've never seen this in practice. People say it's used by terrorists. Steganography is hiding a message so you don't even know it exists. So what you do is you have like an image, and you hide like text inside the image by just changing some pixel colors, and so nobody can find it unless they use the right software to find it. There are some tools to find standard tool methods of steganography. The spy, Anna Chapman, who was a spy maybe 10 years ago in Washington, seducing Washington generals and politicians for Russia. She was caught, and when he found out they were coming to get her, she fled back to Russia, and she left her computer behind, and they found her steganography software. She had software just to hide data and images, and that's usually how you crack it. You get a copy of the software or something. It can be quite difficult to detect, although if you can get a copy of the unaltered image and the altered image, you can sometimes figure it out from that. But it's not easy. The main thing is use these tools like StegDetect and StegSpy and such, but those will only tell you if they're using standard tools for steganography, and it's very easy to just write your own in Python or something. Just take some of the colors and change them a little, and there won't be any way to detect that unless somebody can find your source code in practice. So, let's see here. I reset the password 10 minutes ago and it's still not working. Oh, that's rude. Okay. I don't know what's going on with your Azure. The old radio encryption playing with white noise. Yes, that's right. Similar to that. Yes. There's even a tool that does that called Waste that sends all sorts of extra network traffic and hides your network traffic in among it to try to defeat surveillance. So let's take a look at a Kahoot. This is 121 mod 4. All right, there's the number. All right. All right. So the U.S. law requiring companies to preserve electronic information. All right, that's Sarbanes-Oxley, particularly applying to financial companies, I think. All right, hardware device that only law enforcement can get. Gray Key, now Cellebrite used to only be available to law enforcement, but a few years ago the CEO told me that they're expanding to corporations. But anyway, Gray Key is still limited to law enforcement, as far as I know. All right, which one is essential? You need a right blocker. The rest of these are particular brands of things, and you might have other brands to do it, but you have to have a right blocker of some kind, or you cannot do a proper forensic examination. All right, which Linux tool extracts evidence from a device? DD duplicates data from one device to another. Oh, all right.